Hello everyone, welcome to chapter 10 of the King's Indian Masterclass. Today we're going to be discussing the Averbakh system, which is the system where white basically neglects the development of the g1 knight and instead focuses on developing the bishops, namely to e2 and to g5. Now, the reason that this deserves its own separate video, the reason that this has its own name, is because this likely will not transpose, and white is going for a very specific thing. So let's jump straight into that. I do want to quickly remind you as well that there are PGN files for all of these chapters in the description in case you're interested, and let's go ahead and begin. The main point, the main idea for white is to stop the move e5. If you recall, if they just play knight f3 here, we get e5 with no struggle whatsoever. We explored very deeply all of the options they have here in previous chapters, and black is doing great in all of them. So bishop g5, the point e5 no longer works. Why? Because now the bishop is directly pinning the knight, and this makes all the difference. Once everything gets traded, knight d5 comes with a lot more power. You're hitting the knight, threatening to win the knight. You're also hitting c7, threatening to not only win the pawn, but win the rook as well. And here it's already difficult. I mean, black is losing material here. The best option for them objectively is to lose the exchange. It's very bad for black. So we're not going to go e5 immediately. We're going to prepare it first with the move knight a6. Now, the point of the move knight a6 is to control c7. And therefore, after they play queen d2, and I'll explain this move in a second, but just to get the point of knight a6 across, we go e5, and the same variation no longer comes with the same power because we have the simple move rook d6 in the end, noticing that the square on c7 is defended, and the knight isn't doing anything, right? Trading all of the pieces, we already have a queenless middle game, so this is just going to dry down into a drawish territory. If anything, the computer prefers black a little bit here because of their lead in development. The king is safe, the bishop and the rook can get in quickly, our knights are active, all of our pieces are kind of getting into the game. So, knight a6, preparing e5. The main move is queen d2. This is what we're going to focus on. Now, the reason queen d2 is so popular is because, again, the point of this system is largely to not focus so much on this knight and focus on developing the bishops, the queen, putting some use to these bishops as quickly as possible. The idea here is, of course, bishop h6. And for this reason, castling long is one of the most common approaches for white and the one that we're going to spend the video covering. So, queen to d2. We go e5, as I said. We looked at takes, not so powerful. The move is d5 here. And now we go knight c5, and this is the other purpose of the move knight a6. We're defending c7, but also very directly heading towards c5, where we're putting a lot of pressure on the center. Therefore, the move b4, for example, already tactically fails, because we just take the pawn, and they can take our queen, we take their queen. The line continues a little bit. They take the pawn. It's not as simple as it might seem, but we retreat our knight, and in the end result, we're defending the pawn. The bishop is a little misplaced. Our bishop has the potential to really open up a lot. And for example, after f3, we bring the knight in. They can take the pawn. We can go rook e8, right? We don't have to win the material back immediately. We're down material here, but that's okay because we have quite a lot of compensation in the form of the weak king, right? And we're going to expose that by opening up the center, opening up also the diagonal for the bishop. And things are not looking great here. Black is already doing very good. Obviously, if they castle as well, they lose their bishop. So untangling from this position is very difficult for white. They have to proceed with a lot of caution, and even then, black is better. So the point is, b4 does not work. The move is f3 here, defending on the center, but then again, the knight doesn't seem like it has the potential to develop, and once again, that's why they're going to castle. Here we're going to go a5. Now the move b4 is threatened because the pawn is defended in the center, so a5 to stop b4 and secure a very nice square for our knight. And here the move is castles. Once again, they can't develop the knight on the king side, so instead of addressing that issue, which is really impossible to address, they're going to castle and bring their king to safety on the other side of the board. But now there's a very clear issue. We have a beautiful knight here, the starts of an attack with this pawn as well, the ability to bring the rook in, the ability to bring the bishop in. We have a very quick attack brewing on the queen side. Now, I should note, if they try knight h3 to castle kingside anyways, the reason this doesn't work is because we can just take this knight and then go queen to d7. We're hitting this pawn, and it's not a very easy or fun pawn to defend. We already get too much play, and again, this is why they're very much forced to castle long. So from this position, we're going to continue by launching our pawn immediately. a4. There's no need to focus on developing our bishops. There's already some ideas here. Obviously, this square is really useful to keep an eye on. If they ever stop this pawn from continuing, they lose their queen in one move. So this is a very useful square to keep in mind. There's also the tactic of opening up the file for the rook. That would be very effective if the king ever makes its way to a1. Keep those ideas in mind. So g4. White is going to do their best to brew up some sort of counterattack on the king side. And we go c6. And the move c6 is mainly preparing the move b5 and an eventual expansion on that side of the board. The other point is to take here, because if they take with the pawn, then again, b5 is super easy now. So c6 kind of weakening the defenses that white has towards the center. They can take with the knight, but now our bishop comes out, and again, the knight can be misplaced by an eventual b5, and eventually that's gonna, be the move that happens. Even at the cost of a pawn here, you're not even losing a pawn because this pawn over here is hanging. But even, gambiting that pawn is well worth it. And finally, a3. We're now following a game by Daniel Naroditsky with the black side, and you can already see that black is just winning, right? They've made so much progress, even with the queens out of the game. The attack for black has been very quick. A nice sacrifice here as well, the point of which is to get the pawn going. If you take, for example, the pawn pushes. So bishop takes, the rook moves, and now rook to c8, lining up some more ideas. We have bishop takes, knight takes, and now rook to c1, rook to c2, rook to c8, getting the final pieces into the game. And, Dania converted with not too much trouble in this pretty simply winning position. So let's take a step back for a little bit and come back to this position after they castled long. I want to now explore another variation for them, which is to play the move h4 here. Now, this is likely going to transpose because often they're going to castle long anyways, but their idea here is to at least scare us by immediately going for this attack. The reason I also want to share this is because of this move here, queen to e8, and this is a must-know idea if you're going to utilize this system that I recommend with knight a6. The pin along this diagonal is very annoying, and if you want the queen to be as effective as it can be, usually 9 out of 10 times that means placing it on e8, where it avoids, sidesteps this diagonal, and also contributes to, first of all, the defense on the light squares here, which could become very, very relevant if they were to continue their expansion, but also, importantly, continuing to put an eye on the queen side and, helping, for example, very specifically, the move b5, which is, again, what we're going for. So usually the queen on e8 is a perfectly placed piece, gets out of the pin, and has a lot of purpose. So b5, that's obviously our idea. b4, and now bishop e5, trading the bishops eventually, but b3, and you can see that black is making progress indeed. Eventually a nice tactic appeared on the board. The king couldn't get to safety because this is something that you're going to likely see a lot. The knight obviously can't develop, like I said, so castling kingside is very difficult, and castling queenside will, like we showed in that first game example, leads to a direct attack that black can brew. So it's a little difficult, and often the best chances for them objectively is to keep the king in the center, but when the king's in the center practically, it's very difficult to play precisely, and indeed that's kind of what we're going to see here. Soon you're going to see the beginning of a collapse, a total collapse from white. All of the pieces are just slowly creeping up, and this is kind of what is signified by this move here, a4. It shows that black is perfectly placed. Their knight is a beast, their bishop, their rook, their queen. They don't need to make any more immediate improvements. They wait on the position. It's almost zugzwang, and eventually they're going to crack through. And that comes in the form of a pawn push with b2, where none of the three pieces that white has can really stop that pawn. Very geometrically pleasing finish to the game. So this was a great illustration on the way that you deal with the Averbakh. There's going to be one more game that I want to explore, and this one begins on this move right in the beginning with queen to e8, but you're going to see that it's going to transpose because knight a6 comes and then e5 comes, and it's basically the same as we got this position after h4, and now queen to e8 was played. And once again, queen to e8 is usually the method that is preferred to get the queen off of this diagonal into a nice multi-purpose spot. So again, the knight comes to c5. We defend that knight with a5 indirectly by stopping b4. And we aim to take control of the king side, which is once again where they're likely going to castle. Now, it's true they could have castled on the king side here instead, but that does nothing. We're now stronger on the queen side. They don't have any counterattack on the king side whatsoever. It's almost black who's now playing for the win. I mean, white has lost all of their initial advantage completely. And again, it's black now who has all of the advantage that can really dictate whether the game will end peacefully in a draw, or, you know, potentially, if needed, black can try to push and create something a bit more on the board. Okay, so we're going to look at castle long, which again is where a majority of your games I think will lead. At least, you know, if your opponents play in the spirit of the Averbakh, this is sort of what it means. It means an exciting game where we push on the queen side, they go for an all-out attack on the king side. But likely, very often, black's attack tends to be just a little bit stronger. And you can kind of see that here, where the queen is getting in, the knight is in. There's the idea to very directly launch the pawn up the board. Also, just stack the rooks. Super effective. I mean, these are the moves that you play instantly, right? You don't need to think. These are not positional moves. These are just quick moves that improve your attack. So knight to e8, just defending over c7 and making this pawn here forever safe. And then bishop h6, a nice and smart way to activate the bishop. The knight then comes back to f6, then comes to d7, and, you know, it's obviously heading towards the dark squares here where it can help with the attack. And once again, I mean, up until this point with g4, black's been the only one attacking, and even after g4, I mean, you can hardly call this an attack. This is a very lame excuse of trying something, but it just doesn't carry anything whatsoever. And again, like, it seems like the king side is opening up a little bit, but there's nothing too concrete here for white. And it's black who maintains the constant threat of mate here. So bishop g5, the idea is, of course, to just support that with f6. There's no chances of f4. This is a very strong defensive configuration. f4 was played, in fact, just to open things up, a move out of necessity, but it doesn't save white here because knight to c3 comes with a fork with devastating effect. The queen tries to infiltrate. There's a threat of mate. Don't miss that one. But okay, after queen to d4, the game ended because mate is just going to come very shortly. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Make sure you subscribe if you're new around here. Like this video if you learned something new from it. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.